I'm your guide today, a paleontology science communicator with muddy boots and a soft spot for small creatures, and I want to take you to an island where time does not run. It pulls. On Flores in Indonesia, tucked among volcanoes and forests that thrum with cicadas, bones emerged in 2003 that reframed our picture of the human story. In a cool limestone chamber called Liang Bua, researchers brushed away dust and met a person unlike any living neighbor, barely over a meter tall, long-footed, small-faced, with a brain no bigger than a grapefruit. The excavation leader, a patient Indonesian archaeologist with hands steady from years of pottery repair, told me during a stormy afternoon that the first skull looked like a child's toy, at the bottom of a gravelly stream, complete yet miniature, unmistakably human, but not us. The team named this species Homo floresiensis, though the world quickly nicknamed them the Hobbits. If that sounds like a joke, the cave walls disagree. Scattered stone tools, butchered bones of pygmy elephants called stegodon, and ash-darkened sediments whispered of a community that thrived here for long ages. At first, some skeptics suggested pathology. Perhaps the bones belonged to an individual with microcephaly or a growth disorder. But science is a conversation with time, and time answered. More individuals turned up, sharing the same small body plan, a meter-tall frame, broad feet, wrists and shoulders shaped for ancient styles of movement, teeth worn by a lifetime of tough island foods. And beyond Liang Bua, at a site called Mata Menge on the island's hot interior plains, even older fossils appeared, jaw fragments and teeth from roughly 700,000 years ago, already small, already adapted to island life. This pointed to deep root rather than a one-off accident. So, how does an island make a human so little? On isolated lands, big animals often shrink while small animals grow oversized. Biologists call it the island rule. Flores is an arena where this rule is written in lava and leaf litter. Giants like stegodon dwindled to pony size. Storks swelled to outsized heights. Rats became burly. Lizards like the Komodo dragon kept their throne as ambush monarchs of the river margins. Food is limited, predators are different, and distances are short, so bodies that waste nothing prevail. Over generations, natural selection trims and tunes, and waist-high hominins who needed less food and could slip through thorn and limestone ledges had the advantage. Getting to Flores in the first place demands another mystery. The straits around the island have been barriers for ages. Even at the lowest seas of the Ice Age, deep channels remained. Stone tools on Flores go back nearly a million years, which means ancient seafarers were at least accidental sailors made a crossing long before maps or compasses. Did they lash logs and bamboo with plant fibers, reading the winds the way seabirds do, or drift on storm-torn mats of vegetation? We do not know, but a truth stands. Some small band reached a place that the ocean had set aside, and there, cut off from the rest of humanity, evolution began to experiment. When I first walked into Liang Bua, our local field leader, sleep-deprived, sun-chapped, joking about his perpetually wet socks, pointed to the layered walls and said, "Think of this as a library written in dirt." Each band of sediment recorded floods, fires, volcanoes, and visits by creatures with needs and plans. In one layer you find stegodon ankle bones with the telltale scrape marks of stone tools. In another, the tooth of a giant marabou-like stork. In another, charcoal dust, maybe the ghost of a cooking fire, maybe lightning, maybe both. Science thrives on edge cases, and Flores gave us a human edge case that felt almost like a parable. You can be small and still rewrite a continent's worth of assumptions about how minds and bodies evolve. Because here is the exquisite twist: tiny brains do not automatically mean tiny abilities. The hobbits chipped sharp flakes and points from local stone, carried them across the landscape, butchered animals larger than themselves, and navigated a predator's neighborhood with the kind of caution earned only by living there long enough to teach your children. Our team's wildlife artists spent evenings sketching under a mosquito coil's smoke, trying to capture how a meter-tall hunter might stalk a young stegodon at dusk, staying downwind of dragons, reading hoof prints at the edge of a drying pool. Her notebook filled with drawings of calloused feet, simple spears of palm wood, and woven pouches bulging with tubers and shellfish. And as the sketches multiplied, so did the feeling that we were not just looking at a fossil. We were looking at a way of being human tuned to island time measured not in hours, but in migrations of rain, fruiting of figs, and the yearly rise and fall of tides. In that tempo, patience becomes a tool, and thrift becomes a superpower. Truly, imagine living at hip height to a modern adult, in a forest stitched with limestone ridges and sudden rivers, where your map is a trail of smells and echoes. Homo floresiensis had a body plan that mixed old and new, arches in the feet, but long soles, a shoulder set high and slightly shrug, wrists that echo early Homo, and a pelvis ready for distance walking at a careful, thrifty pace. Their brains were small, yes, yet shaped with folds that do business. A brain is not a bucket, but a city, and size is only one way to count its streets. When I teach students about the island rule, I ask them to picture grocery shopping with a basket instead of a cart. You still plan meals, but you cut waste, choose dense foods, and carry only what matters. That is island evolution's quiet strategy. On Flores, calories were coins, and the hobbits became expert accountants. They hunted small stegodon, likely using surround strategies at gullies and water holes, nudging a calf into mud, then closing with stone flakes hafted into wooden handles. Cut marks on limb bones match this story. Broken bones split for marrow at an exclamation point. They foraged roots, palm hearts, shellfish, and monitor lizards, always wary of Komodo dragons, which watch from shade the way a storm watches from offshore. At twilight the forest changes registers, and here you rely on voices. I picture grandmothers telling stories about safe paths and bad rocks, about storks taller than a dream, about rats the size of cats that bite through baskets. Some evenings bring firelight, though in Liangbua the evidence for controlled fire is patchy. Still, charcoal flecks sparkle in the sediments like distant towns seen from a plane. What did their days feel like? Think of rhythmic work, knapping stone, twisting cordage, stacking palm fronds for a windbreak, scraping hides or bark, nursing infants who can ride on a hip while you gather. Children would learn by shadowing elders, mimicking the angle of a hammer stone, laughing when sparks jump, crying when a dragon's shape slides across a river bend. Our dig's fossil hunter, Rudy, wrestles more with leeches than with academic debates. Yet he taught me how much knowledge fits in a single footprint. He will crouch over a print, close one eye, and say, Stegodon, 2 days ago, moving left to the gorge, and we reroute lunch. Resources shape minds as surely as education does. When you must plan around rainy seasons and masting trees, your calendar is ecological. When you must cross ravines on fallen trunks, your physics is practical. When dragons own the trails at noon, your ethics prizes humility. Now and then the island resets the board. Ash layers in caves and valleys record eruptions. Floods rake away soils. Droughts bite. In those moments, the small body is an asset. You need less water. You can climb into tight refuges. You can wait it out. Evolution writes in probabilities, not headlines. And over tens of thousands of years, the probabilities favored thrifty bodies and cautious brains. Some researchers frame the hobbits as descendants of Homo erectus that washed in and shrank. Others argue for an even older lineage that arrived small. Either way, Matamenja's fossils tell us that small-bodied hominins were present long before the layers preserved at Liangbua, which makes the species less of a surprise and more of a saga. To trace a saga, you need more than bones. You need landscapes. Flores is a corridor of habitats from beach to cloud forest, and moving through them is a daily field course and limits. Salt on the coast tempts, but storms punish. Inland springs reward, but cliffs interject. Cave shelter, but darkness negotiates a price. Living on an island teaches you to measure risk the way fish measure current, with the whole body. Our Indonesian colleagues just smiled, adjusted their loads, and kept moving with the patience of people who were raised by rain. It lets you admit that a tiny skull can hold a big idea. It lets you reconsider textbook timelines. It lets you notice that a miniature stone knife can still open a giant story. Consider the predator's view. Komodo dragons can smell blood on the wind. They wait, they test, then strike like a door slamming. For hobbits, vigilance was culture. Perhaps they built platforms for sleeping, or huddled in caves when the heat crushed the afternoons, or traveled in small groups that could scatter and regroup like a murmuration close to the ground. Even their silence would be an adaptation, a technology as real as a spear tip, because quiet saves calories and avoids notice. Small bodies, small fires, small tools, none of these mean small lives. If anything, their lives were fine-grained, like sand that has been turned by waves until every edge is smoothed and every grain knows its neighbors by touch. And that, to me, is the heart of island time, attention stretched across fewer resources, deeper rather than wider, slow but steady, a tempo that rewards remembering. Right. The layers at Liongbua hold another turn in the story, one that is quieter than any Hollywood ending. Redating of the sediments tighten the timeline. The last clear signs of Homo floresiensis at Liongbua now settle around 50,000 years ago, and above those layers, the cave shifts to a new caste, modern humans, with different tools, different fires, different habits. Does that mean the two never met? Not necessarily. Older myths on Flores speak of small, mischievous forest people called the Ebugogo. Tales are not data, but people often hang stories on old nails. As a scientist, I listen respectfully and keep the ledger open. Folklore is a compass needle that points to questions worth asking with testable methods. What we can test are layers and bones, and those say the Hobbit's local chapter closes by about 50,000 years ago. Why close at all? Islands are laboratories but also tightropes. A weather wobble can turn a valley harsh. A volcanic pulse can erase a season's worth of stored calories. The arrival of a new predator, even a clever one named Homo sapiens, can pull threads loose. Extinction is rarely a single-door hallway. It is a house of 1,000 small doors, and a species steps through many without noticing until the last clicks behind it. On one wet season morning, our team hiked to a river cut where the bank had slumped, exposing a fresh slice of time. We found nothing headline-worthy that day, only charcoal drifts and rodent teeth and a few flakes, and yet the walk back felt strangely full. What the Hobbits gave us was not a monster reveal, but a calibration. They teach that human possibility is broader than we assumed, that bodies can shrink without dignity shrinking, that minds can plan without leaving murals or monuments. They remind us that success can be local, not global. That, on some maps, the sustainable choice is the one that wastes the least and brags the least. I carry that lesson when I talk about conservation today. Islands worldwide still practice their experiments. Dwarf elephants once stepped through Mediterranean caves. The Channel Islands raised miniature mammoths. Komodo dragons still rule in Indonesia. New Zealand rewrote bird biology in the absence of mammals. When we bulldoze a mangrove, or overfish a reef or ferry invasive rats to a beach, we kick over the experiment and then wonder why the results vanish. Flores whispers a better approach: protect corridors so that creatures can move when the rains fail. Protect refuges so that small populations have somewhere to wait. Protect knowledge by funding local scientists whose families keep the keys to the caves and the stories about which slopes collapse after too much rain. One of my proudest field memories is not a find, but a friendship. Watching an elder from a village near Liongbua explain to our youngest student how to read a hill's color for hidden water, and seeing her face change as she realized that geology is also biography, that landscapes remember. Moments like that make paleontology feel less like grave robbing the past and more like learning the manners of a living place. So, Where does the Hobbit of Flores fit when we tell the human story to children who are growing up on crowded coasts and warming nights? I tell them that the human family tried many shapes and tempos. Some marched across continents and learned to paint with ochre. Some settled into high plateaus and made songs thin enough for the air. Some, like our hobbits, became small and careful and precise, and lasted not because they conquered the world, but because they belonged to a corner of it with grace. To belong is not a lesser verb, it is a skill, and the island people of Flores had it. They threaded their days between dragons and droughts, reading a library written in dirt and wind, and for a very long time the library let them keep a card. When the card expired, it was not a failure. It was what evolution often does, turning the page. We, who add pages at astonishing speed, can honor them by choosing which experiments on Earth we will protect, and which we will not run at all. I have one last image to leave with you. Stand at the entrance of Liangbua at dawn. Mist tucks itself into the cave mouth. The forest pulse begins. Cicadas rise, a gecko ticks, water plinks into a basin carved by patience. A small footprint crosses damp ash and pauses, angled toward a valley where storks step like quiet judges. You cannot see the face that made it, you cannot hear the language. You can, however, feel the choice written there, to move lightly, to notice, to use what the island offers and return what you can. That is a human choice. We may never know which door was the last they passed through, or whether they watched newcomers light a different kind of fire in the cave, but we know they were here, and we know enough to be grateful. Flores gave us a reminder drafted in bone and ash. Smallness is not weakness. Solitude is not emptiness. Limits are not the enemy of wisdom. Homo floresiensis, listen well. May we do the same, wherever we are standing when the tide turns next.